Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Muhammad Faiqri Muyassar. I'm from Class B English Literature 2019, and I make this video for the mid-test of the history of English literature, and I will explain to you about some period of English literature. And now let's begin into the first explanation. The first one, we've got Anglo-Saxon period from 449 until 100, 1066. Okay, so Anglo-Saxon period. In this era, many literary works were written anonymously or no one knows who the author is. However, there were two writers who were dominant in the Anglo-Saxon area, Cædmon and Alfred the Great. Cædmon was an Anglo-Saxon poet known as the father of Old English. He was also known the first Old English Christian poet, whose fragmentary hymn to the creation remains a symbol of the adaptation of the aristocratic, heroic Anglo-Saxon first tradition to the expressions of Christian themes. And the second writer, Alfred the Great, was a king of the Anglo-Saxons who support the Anglo-Saxon chronicle describing the life, history, and language of this era. He was a king of the West Saxons at the end of the 9th century, was known as the translator of Cura Pastoralis, a guide to living and spiritual education. Alfred launched a significant translation program of several literary works from Latin to English as a language of learning. He commissioned several more translations of history, geography, and even of Cædmon's hymn into West Saxons, which became the dominant language in the 10th and 11th centuries. And the second major work of Old English is Beowulf. Beowulf was written in the 8th century by an unknown writer. It was the best-known long text of Old English, the epic poem in the alliterative verse. Beowulf tells about a legendary hero who kills powerful, frightening creatures and becomes a king. He defeats the mortal enemy of the area, the monster Grendel, and had thus made the territory safe for its people. The people and the setting are both Germanic. The poem recalls a shared heroic past, somewhere in the general consciousness of the audience who would hear it. The language of Beowulf is extremely rich and inventive, fully of imposing tones and rhythms. There are a great many near synonyms for warrior, many compound adjectives denoting hardness, many images of light, color, and blood, many superlative and exaggeration to underline the heroic and legendary aspects of the tale. And the second period is medieval period from 1066 until 1485. The characteristic of this period is about kings and the rulers, the governments, feudal system, law of primogeniture, Christian morality, language, religion, chivalry codes, and famine and plague. Writers in what we now call the Middle English period, late 12th century to 1485, did not necessarily always write in English. The language was in a state of flux. Attempts were made to assert the French language, to keep down the local language, or English, and to make the language of the courts, or Latin, the language of writing. The major growth of literature comes more than a century after Layamon's birth and confirms the range of potential language for literature. Robert Manning based his lively handling scene, first treatise on the Ten Commandments and the Seven Deadly Sins. On the French source, John Gower wrote his best-known work, Confessi Amantis, in English, despite its Latin title. And the third is the Renaissance and Reformation period, from 1500 until 1600. The characteristic of this period is divided into two parts: the Elizabethan and Jacobean ages and the literary tendencies of the age. The Elizabethan and Jacobean, or political peace and stability, social development, religious tolerance, sense and feeling of patriotism, discovery, exploration and explanation, influence of foreign invasions, contradictions, and set of oppositions. While the literary tendencies of the age, foreign's influence, ardent spirit of adventure, abundance of output. The first author and his work is William Shakespeare. William Shakespeare was the greatest writer of the era, born in 1564. He was an actor and a poet, but is best known for his plays. He also wrote tragedies and comedies, and Shakespeare has become one of the most well-known playwrights in England. Some plays he is well known for are Hamlet, Romeo and Juliet, Midsummer Night's Dream, Twelfth Night, and Henry V. The second author is Miguel de Cervantes. Miguel was a Spanish influential writer during the Renaissance. He wrote numerous plays and works of fiction, including novellas ejemplares in 1613. Cervantes was not widely known, however, until the publication of his most influential piece, Don Quixote de la Mancha. This novel was published in 1604 and made Cervantes extremely popular in Spain. In this novel tells of a country gentleman who searches for adventure in life. And the fourth period is Revolution and Restoration. This time is from 1600 until 1700. The first is poetry. The most prominent form of poetry during the Restoration period is the heroic couplet, a form of poetry in which each time contains 5 strong stresses in each second syllable, iambic pentameter, and every 2 lines rhyme with each other. Famous figures in this period are John Dryden, 1631 until 1700. He was known as a playwright, critic, and satirist. His poems reflect the political upheavals and religious conflicts that have existed since Puritan times, and also reflect Dryden's fickle stance. In religion, he is also inconsistent, always changing religions. Dryden's superiority is in satire, political, religious, story poems, and some dramas, which are often called heroic tragedies because they are written in the form of a heroic couplet. His work include The Conquest of Granada, The Indian Queen, and Aurangzeb. Drama. The most popular form of drama during the Restoration period was comedy of manners. This kind of drama usually depicts associations, conversation, as well as intrigues and various love affairs among the upper class at the time, which were free from moral consideration and romantic elements, and were even said to be absent. The most famous playwrights are William Congreve from 1670 until 1729. He was the greatest kid writer of the Restoration period. He was heavily influenced by Molière, the French writer, and like the Linney authors, he satirized the attitudes of the people of the time. His works are Love for Love and The Way of the World. And the second is William Wycherley from 1640 until 1716. He wrote The Courtly Wife, The Plain Dealer, and Love in a Wood. And prose. This period was marked by the use of reason, not imagination. Ratio is very instrumental in the development of prose writing. Therefore, a number of critics, historians, philosophers, and religious writers emerged at that time. The 2 greatest philosophers are Thomas Hobbes from 1588 until 1679. He was a naturalist who states that natural science should be the foundation of all human knowledge. His ideas are expressed in the book The Leviathan. John Locke from 1632 until 1704. He said that all human beings and governments are formed to protect these rights. His theories about politics are written in the book Treatise on Government. And the fifth period is the 18th century period, from 1700 until 1800. The characteristic of this period is the classical age, rule of rules, age of good sense and reasons, religious and philosophical thought. The the French influence, nature followed, reflection of the contemporary society, satire, poetic diction, and the heroic couplet. The first, the first author is Alexander Pope. Alexander Pope was the predominant figure in the poetry of the 18th century. He was the representative poet of his century. He was the only poet who present in his work almost all the essential qualities of the classical school of poetry. He was the high priest of a rationalistic and fashionable age. The evolution of Pope's poetic career is generally classified into four periods. In the first period, he wrote his pastorals, essay on criticism, and the rape of the lock. The translation of Horner was carried out in the second period, the third period, which is the best period of Pope's life and which has been called the Twinklium or Horatian period, witnessed the composition of the Dunciad and the Epistles. The poet gave views in his fourth period his philosophical essay on man and epistle to Dr. Arbuthnot. The second author is Jonathan Swift. Jonathan Swift was an Irish author and satirist, best known for writing Gulliver's Travels. He was then of St. Patrick's Cathedral in Dublin. He was Irish author, clergyman, and satirist Jonathan Swift grew up fatherless. Under the care of his uncle, he received a bachelor's degree from Trinity College and then worked as a statesman assistant. Eventually, he became dean of St. Patrick's Cathedral in Dublin. Most of his writings were published under pseudonyms. He is remembered for his 1726 book Gulliver's Travels. He was one of the greatest literary figures of the age of Pope. His writings have been generally considered works of fiction and art. Satire is the prime motive in all his works. His satire remains uniform in quality, but differs in degree. We have some veins of satirical tone in his three great satires, The Battle of the Books, The Tale of a Tub, and Gulliver's Travel. I think that is all my explanation about the 5 period of the history of English literature, and thank you and see you.